Hello. Just a few weeks later, I caught her with another man at a local strawberry farm and things went awry. My name's Tom, 35, and my wife, Jennifer, is 33. We've been married for almost 7 years now, and to everyone on the outside, we were the perfect couple. I thought we had it all, good jobs, a cozy little home, even plans to start a family soon. Jen was everything to me, smart, funny, and always knew how to light up a room. Let me backtrack a little and set the scene. For as long as I can remember, berry picking has been my thing. Every year, as soon as the season starts, I make it a point to head out to the farms on the weekends. It's my little escape from everything, work, stress, you name it. And Jennifer? Well, she's never been as into it as I am, but she'd tag along sometimes. Said it was nice to get out of the house, especially when the weather was good. This year, though, was a bit different. I'd been swamped with work lately, and some weekends, I just didn't have the time to make the trip. So, to my surprise, Jen started going without me. At first, I thought it was sweet. She'd come home with a basket of strawberries, all proud, and say, "Look what I got today." I guess I was just glad she was enjoying something I loved, even if I couldn't always join her. But there were a couple of weekends when she didn't just bring back strawberries, she came back in this oddly cheerful mood. Not that I'm complaining, but you know when you start to notice things, even if you can't quite put your finger on why they seem off. That was me, trying to brush it off and telling myself not to overthink things. Anyway, a few weekends ago, I finally managed to clear my schedule and asked Jennifer if she wanted to head to the strawberry farm together. She seemed a bit hesitant at first, which threw me off, but then she smiled and said, "Sure, let's go. It'll be fun." So, that Saturday, we got in the car, and it felt like old times. The drive was nice, just the two of us, listening to the radio and talking about random things. For a moment, I thought maybe we were getting back to our usual rhythm. When we got to the farm, everything looked perfect, the rows of strawberry plants, the families with their kids running around, baskets in hand. It was one of those bright, sunny days where everything just felt right. I parked the car, and we grabbed a couple of baskets, ready to spend the morning picking strawberries. We wandered down the rows, picking the ripest berries we could find, and for a while, it felt like things were back to normal. I'd crack a joke, and she'd laugh, and we'd tease each other about who found the biggest strawberries. But every now and then, I'd catch her glancing at her phone or looking around the field like she was expecting to see someone. It was subtle, but I noticed. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She smiled, a bit too brightly. "Yeah, just checking the time. We don't want to be here all day, right?" I didn't think much of it at the moment. I mean, maybe she had plans later, or maybe I was just being paranoid. We kept picking, and she kept slipping her phone back into her pocket every few minutes. I tried to ignore it, but that little voice in the back of my head kept nagging at me. As we moved down the rows, I noticed Jen was slowly drifting further away, almost like she was trying to create some distance between us. She'd wander off a few steps, then come back, then wander off again. It was weird, but I figured maybe she just wanted some space to do her own thing. I mean, we'd both been busy lately, and maybe she was just enjoying a little quiet time. But then something happened that I didn't expect. While I was kneeling down, filling my basket, I heard her voice. I glanced up and saw her a bit further down the row, talking to someone. A guy. They were laughing, and she had this easy, relaxed look on her face, the kind I hadn't seen in a while. I tried to play it cool, walking over casually, like I was just joining the conversation. As I got closer, I could see Jen stiffen up a bit. She introduced him as Ryan, one of the farmhands she'd met on one of her solo trips here. He seemed friendly enough, but something about the way they were standing, a little too close, made my stomach twist. Ryan made some joke about how Jen was a regular now, and she laughed, saying, "Yeah, I guess I just can't get enough of these strawberries." It was supposed to be light-hearted, but I couldn't help feeling like I was missing something. Like there was this whole other story happening, and I wasn't a part of it. I shrugged it off, told myself I was overreacting, and kept picking. But for the rest of that morning, I couldn't shake this feeling that something was off, like a puzzle with a piece missing. And as we drove home, with the sun setting and Jen humming along to the radio, I couldn't help but wonder if I was being paranoid, or if there was something I wasn't seeing. A week went by after that trip to the strawberry farm. I tried to let go of the uneasy feeling I had, telling myself it was just in my head. Besides, things felt pretty normal between Jen and me that week. We had dinner together, watched some movies, and even made plans to visit her parents next weekend. It felt like we were settling back into a comfortable routine. Then, one evening, everything changed. I had just come home from work, exhausted and ready to just crash on the couch, when I found Jennifer waiting for me in the living room. She had this strange look on her face, part excitement, part nerves, and she was practically bouncing on the edge of her seat. "Hey, you okay?" I asked, kicking off my shoes and dropping my bag by the door. She nodded, then stood up and took my hands in hers. "I have something to tell you," she said, her voice trembling just a bit. I could feel her hands shaking, and my mind started racing, trying to figure out what was going on. "You're scaring me," I said, trying to make a joke to lighten the mood, but she just smiled and squeezed my hands tighter. "I'm pregnant," she blurted out, her eyes shining with tears. "And, it's twins." For a moment, I just stood there, processing what she had said. Pregnant. Twins. My mind was scrambling to catch up, but my heart was soaring. I felt this rush of emotion that I can't even describe, joy, disbelief, excitement, all mixed together. I could barely get the words out. "Are you serious? Twins?" I stammered, my voice cracking a little. Jen laughed, and I could see the tears starting to spill down her cheeks. "Yes, twins. Can you believe it?" She grabbed my face and kissed me, and I could taste the salt of her tears on my lips. "We're going to be parents, Tom." I pulled her into a tight hug, and we just stood there, holding each other, letting it sink in. I felt like I was on top of the world. Everything I had been worrying about, every little doubt, just vanished in that moment. We were going to have a family, not just a baby, but two. It was more than I ever dared to dream. The rest of the evening was a blur of excitement. We ordered takeout and celebrated in the only way we knew how, by talking and dreaming about the future. And Jen, she couldn't stop herself from imagining what life would be like with our little ones. "You know what I can't wait for," she said, her eyes sparkling as she picked at her noodles. "Taking them to the farms. Just imagine it, Tom. We'll take them to the strawberry fields, and they'll run around with those little baskets, trying to pick the biggest, juiciest strawberries they can find. We'll make it a tradition, just like you always did. Can't you see it?" I could see it. In my mind, I could picture these tiny kids running between the rows, their faces sticky with strawberry juice, laughing and chasing each other under the sun. And Jen, standing there with that smile I loved, watching over them. It was a perfect picture, the kind of family I'd always dreamed of. "Yeah," I said, grinning like an idiot. "I can see it." I was so happy I felt like I could burst. We started planning out every detail, talking about names, and how we'd decorate the nursery. Jen even joked about getting them little overalls and hats for their first berry-picking trip. "I just know they're going to love it," she said, her hand resting gently on her stomach. "I can't wait to show them all the things you love." I spent the rest of that night lying awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind filled with thoughts of the future. Everything suddenly felt so much brighter, so full of hope. I thought about those weekends at the farms, with Jen and our twins, laughing and picking strawberries, and it felt like everything I ever wanted was right there, within reach. I was so overwhelmed with happiness that it was almost unreal. Whatever doubts I'd had before seemed so small and distant now, like shadows that couldn't touch the joy I was feeling. It felt like we were finally moving forward, like everything was falling into place. The weekend rolled around, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't feeling that usual excitement to head out to the strawberry farm. Don't get me wrong, I still loved it, especially now with the thought of our future kids tagging along one day. But something had shifted. With the news that we were expecting twins, my mind was buzzing with all the things we'd need to prepare for. I was going to be a dad, and not just to one little one, but two. That meant more of everything, more diapers, more bottles, more clothes. And as much as I wanted to keep things feeling normal, I knew I had to step it up. So, I spent the morning looking over some extra work I could take on, figuring out how I'd make things work so I could provide for our growing family. Jen noticed me buried in my laptop when she came downstairs, all bright and full of energy. She had that pregnancy glow, and I swear she was beaming even more than usual. "Are you ready?" she asked, slipping on her shoes and grabbing her keys. I looked up, confused for a second. "Ready for what?" "The farm, silly," she said, with a playful smile. "It's Saturday." "Oh, right, yeah, about that." I hesitated, not sure how to explain. "I was thinking we might skip it this weekend. I've got some work I need to catch up on, and, well, I just want to make sure we're set, you know. With the twins coming, I should probably start thinking ahead." I half expected her to be disappointed, maybe even try to convince me to go. But instead, her face lit up even more. "That's okay. I'll go by myself," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Honestly, I've been feeling this burst of energy lately, like I could take on the world. I think it's the babies giving me a second wind." She rested her hand on her belly, and I couldn't help but smile. "You sure?" I asked. "I mean, I can finish up and we can still go later if you want." But she shook her head, already heading towards the door. "No, it's fine. I need to get out and move around, and I'll pick up some extra strawberries. Maybe we can make a pie or something later." She was practically bouncing with excitement. "Plus, it'll be nice to get some fresh air. I've been stuck inside all week." "All right, then," I said, finally relenting. "But just, don't overdo it, okay? I don't want you pushing yourself too hard, especially now." I pointed to her belly, trying to sound stern, but I couldn't hide the grin creeping onto my face. She rolled her eyes and laughed. "I'm not fragile, you know. I'm pregnant, not made of glass. But don't worry, I'll be careful." She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and grabbed her keys. "Take care of whatever you need to hear. I've got the farm covered." I watched her head out, still feeling a bit uneasy. I knew she was right, she was strong and capable, and if she wanted to go pick strawberries, there was no reason to stop her. But a part of me felt a pang of guilt, like maybe I should have just dropped everything and gone with her. As she drove off, I called out one last reminder: "Take care of our little ones, okay?" She turned and gave me that same radiant smile. "I will, I promise," she said, and then she was gone, off to the farm with a spring in her step. I settled back into my work, but I couldn't fully concentrate. Every few minutes, my mind would wander, picturing her out there among the rows of strawberries, the sun shining down, and her belly just barely starting to show. I imagined her bending down, carefully picking the best berries she could find, humming to herself, dreaming about our future kids. It was a sweet image, and for a moment, I felt this wave of peace wash over me. Everything was going to be okay. We were going to be okay. We had a lot to figure out, but we'd get there, together. Or at least, that's what I thought. I managed to finish my work faster than I thought. As I sat there, staring at my laptop, I kept thinking about Jen out at the farm, picking strawberries with that newfound energy of hers. It was a beautiful day, and the idea of her being out there on her own while I stayed cooped up inside didn't sit right with me. Plus, the farm wasn't too far, just a quick ride away. I decided to surprise her. Maybe I could help her finish up and we could ride back together, just the two of us, with baskets full of strawberries and the afternoon sun warming our backs. So, I grabbed my bike from the garage, hopped on, and pedaled my way toward the farm. The wind felt good as I rode, cutting through my worries and filling my mind with that same excitement I'd felt the moment Jen told me she was pregnant. I imagined us picking strawberries side by side, her teasing me about my dad instincts kicking in, and I couldn't help but smile. It was going to be a nice surprise. When I got to the farm, I slowed down, looking out over the fields. There were a few families still out there, kids with little baskets, but no sign of Jen. Then I spotted her car parked off to the side. She had to be around somewhere. Maybe she'd gone to take a break or grab a drink. I leaned my bike against the fence and started walking around, scanning the rows of plants, but I didn't see her anywhere. The sun was starting to dip a little lower in the sky, casting a soft, golden light over everything. It felt peaceful, but also strange, like I was missing something. I figured she might be in the small house near the entrance, the one where you usually pay for your baskets or buy pre-picked strawberries. It was a quaint little place, and I'd seen her stop there before to chat with the workers. I started making my way over, thinking she might be inside getting ready to head back, or maybe buying a few extra pints to take home. When I stepped inside the house, it was quiet. There was the familiar smell of fresh berries in the air, but no one was at the counter. I glanced around, half expecting to see Jen coming out of one of the back rooms, but nothing. "Jen." I called out, but there was no response. Just the faint hum of a fridge and the distant murmur of people out in the fields. I wandered further in, past the counter, to where there was a small extension off to the side. I'd never really been back there, but I figured maybe she was checking out something they had for sale or chatting with one of the workers. The door to the extension was slightly ajar, and as I pushed it open, I noticed a narrow hallway leading to a few rooms. I kept walking, my footsteps quiet on the wooden floor, and that's when I saw it, a door at the end of the hallway, slightly cracked open, with a faint light spilling out from inside. I don't know why, but I felt my heart start to race. I took a deep breath, told myself I was being ridiculous, and walked closer, my hand reaching out to gently push the door open the rest of the way. I pushed open the door, my heart pounding, not sure what I would find. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. There, on a pile of hay, was Jennifer, half naked, her dress bunched up around her waist. And the farmer, the same guy I'd seen around the farm, was right there with her, his hands on her. For a second, it felt like everything around me froze. My mind struggled to catch up with what my eyes were seeing, but then rage took over. Without thinking, I stormed into the room, grabbed the farmer by the collar, and yanked him off her. He stumbled back, wide-eyed, as I shoved him away, sending him crashing against the wall. "What the hell are you doing?" I snarled, but I barely heard my own voice. My focus shifted immediately to Jen. She was scrambling to cover herself, her face flushed with embarrassment and fear, trying to pull down her dress, her hands shaking. "Get up," I said, my voice tight and cold. She looked at me, tears welling up in her eyes, but I didn't have the patience for it. I grabbed her arm, pulling her to her feet, not caring if she had time to fix herself. "We're leaving." I dragged her out of that room, out of the small house, and out into the open. She was half-dressed, her hair a mess, trying desperately to adjust her clothes, covering herself with her hands. I didn't care who saw us. I didn't care about the stares from the families nearby, the parents and kids who had been out in the fields picking strawberries just moments before. People stopped and turned, whispering as we passed. I could feel their eyes on us, their confusion, and their judgment, but none of it mattered. Jen was trying to hide her face, trying to pull her dress down, but it was useless. The damage was done, and there was no hiding from it now. "Get in the car," I said, pushing her towards it. She hesitated, trying to say something, maybe to explain or apologize, but I cut her off. "Just get in." She climbed into the passenger seat, still trying to cover herself, tears starting to spill down her cheeks. I went back and grabbed my bike, awkwardly lifting it and forcing it into the back seat of the car. I could feel the stares, the eyes of strangers watching this whole mess unfold, but I ignored them. I just needed to get out of there, away from this place, away from all of it. I got into the driver's seat, slamming the door behind me. Jen was still crying softly, her hands trembling as she tried to adjust her dress. I didn't say a word. I started the car, gripped the steering wheel tightly, and drove. The ride home was silent, except for her quiet sobs and the occasional sniffle. I didn't look at her, couldn't bring myself to. I just kept my eyes on the road, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe, and I wanted to scream, but there were no words, no sounds. Just this crushing silence that filled the car, suffocating us both. The farm, the strawberries, the sunshine, everything that had seemed so perfect just a week ago, was now a distant memory, replaced by this cold, harsh reality. And as we drove back, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. The drive home felt like it lasted forever, but at the same time, it was over too quickly. I was still numb when we pulled into the driveway, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white. I killed the engine, but for a moment, I just sat there, staring straight ahead, trying to collect my thoughts. I could hear Jennifer's quiet sobs beside me, but I didn't look at her. I couldn't. When we got inside the house, everything I'd been holding back came rushing out. I slammed the door shut behind us, and the noise echoed through the hallway. "What the hell was that, Jen?" I shouted, my voice louder and harsher than I'd ever heard it. "How long has this been going on?" She was still trying to pull herself together, her eyes red and swollen, but she looked terrified. "It's not what it looks like, Tom, I swear," she stammered. "It was a mistake." "A mistake?" I cut her off, my voice shaking. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk, not whatever the hell that was." I was pacing now, my heart pounding, my thoughts spiraling out of control. And then the question that had been clawing at my mind all night burst out before I could stop it. "Who are you pregnant from, Jen? Is it even mine? Or is it his?" Her face crumpled, and she took a step towards me, reaching out with trembling hands. "No, Tom, it's yours. I swear, the babies are yours." How am I supposed to believe that? I snapped, stepping back, out of her reach. "How do I know anything you've said is true? You've been lying, sneaking around, who knows what else?" My chest felt tight, and I could hardly breathe. "Well, we'll find out. Technology makes it easy these days, right? We can know for sure." She looked panicked, shaking her head. "Tom, please, you have to believe me." "I don't have to do anything," I interrupted, my voice cold. "We're going to the hospital, and we're getting a DNA test. Tomorrow." I didn't care how angry I sounded. I was past caring. I needed the truth, and I needed it now. If they can do it fast, I'll pay whatever it takes. Jen's face went pale, but she didn't argue. She just nodded, wiping the tears from her cheeks. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, we'll do the test." I barely slept that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the events of the day replaying over and over in my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her in that room, on that haystack, and my stomach twisted into knots. I wanted to scream, to hit something, but instead, I just lay there, numb and exhausted. The next morning, I was up before the sun. I didn't even bother to eat, I just got dressed and told Jen to get ready. We drove to the hospital in silence, not a single word exchanged between us. When we arrived, I marched straight to the reception desk. "I need a DNA test," I said, my voice steady but tense. "I want it done as fast as possible, and I'm willing to pay whatever it takes." The nurse behind the desk blinked, surprised, but she nodded and started typing on her computer. "We have expedited testing available," she said. "It'll cost extra, but we can have results in about 48 hours. "Fine," I said, pulling out my wallet. "Just make it happen." They took us to a small room, where they swabbed Jen's cheek and mine, taking samples quickly and efficiently. The whole process barely took 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. Jen tried to catch my eye, but I avoided her gaze, staring at the wall, just waiting for it to be over. As we left the hospital, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. We'd have answers soon, real answers. But part of me was terrified of what those answers would be. If the babies were mine, what then? Could I ever forgive her? Could I trust her again? And if they weren't? I didn't even want to think about it. The ride home was just as silent as the one there. We were two strangers sitting side by side, each of us lost in our own thoughts, waiting for the clock to tick down, waiting for the truth to finally come out. The next 48 hours felt like the longest of my life. I barely ate, barely slept. I just kept checking my email, waiting for that notification, the one that would either confirm Jen's words or tear everything apart. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would jump into my throat, only to settle back down when it was just another useless spam message. Then, on the morning of the second day, it came. The email from the hospital, with the test results attached. I stared at it for a moment, my hands shaking so badly I could barely tap the screen to open it. Part of me didn't want to look, didn't want to face what I already suspected, but I knew there was no running from it. I took a deep breath, clicked the email, and opened the report. My eyes scanned the words, trying to make sense of the medical jargon, but the line that mattered hit me like a punch to the gut. Probability of paternity, 0%. My mind went blank. I read it again, and again, as if the words would somehow change, but they didn't. The test was clear, the twins Jen was carrying weren't mine. They never had been. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the screen, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. It was like I'd been falling, endlessly, and now I'd finally hit the bottom. Everything we'd talked about, everything I'd been dreaming about, the kids, the family, the future, none of it was real. It was all just a lie. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually, a cold, steely calm washed over me. I got up, grabbed a couple of bags from the closet, and headed down the hall to Jen's room. She was sitting on the bed, reading, or at least pretending to. When I burst in, she looked up, startled, her eyes widening when she saw the expression on my face. "Tom, what?" I didn't let her finish. I threw the bags onto the bed, my voice cold and steady. "Pack your things. You have 2 hours." She blinked, clearly confused, but I could see the panic starting to creep into her eyes. "What are you talking about?" "The test came back," I said, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. "The twins aren't mine. So, I want you out of this house. You have 2 hours to pack your stuff and leave." Her face went pale, and she opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. "Don't," I snapped. "I don't want to hear your excuses, your lies. Just pack your things and go." "Tom, please," she started, her voice shaking. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" I shouted, my voice echoing through the room. "That you've been lying to me. That you've been sleeping with someone else while pretending to be happy about starting a family with me. I don't want to hear it, Jen. I'm done." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she tried to reach out, but I stepped back, avoiding her touch like it was poison. "Tom, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen." "Yeah, well, it did," I said, my voice colder than I thought possible. "And now you need to leave. I don't care where you go, but you're not staying here. Not after everything you've done." For a moment, she just stared at me, as if she was waiting for me to change my mind, to soften, to give her a chance to explain. But there was nothing left to say. I was done listening, done believing in her lies. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her there with the bags on the bed, her tears, and her regrets. As I made my way back down the hall, I heard her start to cry, the sound muffled through the walls. It should have hurt to hear it, but all I felt was a numb, hollow ache. I had loved her once, more than I could ever put into words, but now all I wanted was for her to be gone, for this nightmare to be over. 2 hours. That was all the time I was willing to give her to pack up and leave my life, and even that felt like too much. 2 hours later, I was back in Jen's room, watching as she zipped up the last of her bags, her eyes red and puffy from crying. I didn't say a word. I just grabbed the bags and started hauling them out to the car, one by one, until everything she owned was packed and ready to go. She tried to talk to me, to plead, but I shut her down every time. I didn't want to hear her voice. I just wanted her gone. Once everything was loaded up, I walked back inside, saw her standing there, and jerked my head towards the car. "Get in." She hesitated, like she thought there was still some chance to talk things through, but the look on my face must have told her otherwise. She followed me out, dragging her feet, and got into the passenger seat. I slammed the trunk shut and climbed in behind the wheel, starting the engine without a word. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the car cutting through the quiet streets, but I could feel her staring at me, waiting for me to say something. Eventually, she couldn't hold it in any longer. "Tom, where are we going?" she asked, her voice trembling. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were turning white. "The farm," I said, my voice flat, emotionless. "You're going to live there now?" "What?" She looked at me, completely thrown off. "What do you mean?" "I can't stay at the farm." "Why not?" I snapped, finally turning to glare at her. "You seemed pretty comfortable there the other day. Maybe your new boyfriend will take you in, huh? Or did you think you could just come crawling back to me after everything?" Tears welled up in her eyes again, and she shook her head, trying to reach out and grab my arm. "Tom, please, don't do this. I don't have anywhere else to go." "Not my problem," I said, cutting her off. "You made your bed, Jen. Now you can lie in it." I turned back to the road, pressing down harder on the gas pedal, as if speeding up would somehow make all of this easier to deal with. "I don't care if the farmer takes you in or not. As far as I'm concerned, you belong there now." She started to sob, but I didn't let it affect me. I'd heard enough of her tears, her apologies, her lies. Every time she spoke, it just made the knot in my stomach twist tighter, made the betrayal feel sharper. I wanted to be done with it. Done with her. The farm came into view, the familiar fields stretching out under the fading afternoon sun. It looked just like it had a week ago, peaceful and quiet, but now it felt different. I pulled up to the entrance, the same spot where we'd parked together so many times before, and put the car in park. "Get out," I said, my voice barely more than a growl. She didn't move, just sat there, staring at me, her lips trembling. I said, "Get out, Jen." She slowly unbuckled her seatbelt, still looking at me like she couldn't believe what was happening. "Tom, please, don't leave me here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I met her gaze, and for a moment, I almost felt something, pity, maybe, or regret, but then I remembered that email, those words that had shattered everything. "I already have," I said, my voice cold and final. "Now get out." She hesitated, like she thought she could change my mind if she just waited long enough, but I didn't flinch. Finally, she opened the door and stepped out, standing there beside the car, clutching her bag to her chest. I got out, too, went around to the trunk, and started unloading her things, dropping them onto the dirt, one by one. "Tom," she started, but I didn't let her finish. "I don't want to hear it," I said, slamming the trunk shut. "This is where you belong now. Figure it out." I got back into the car, not giving her another look. I could still see her in the rearview mirror, standing there with her bags, her shoulders slumped, her face crumpled with tears. Part of me wanted to feel something, anger, sadness, even satisfaction, but all I felt was numb. I pulled away, leaving her standing there in the dust, and drove off without looking back. The day after I left Jennifer at the farm, I did what I knew had to be done. I went straight to my lawyer's office and filed for divorce. I didn't want to drag it out, didn't want to deal with the mess any longer than I had to. I just wanted her out of my life, clean and simple. Thankfully, the process moved fast. Jen and I didn't have any property tied up together, no kids yet, no joint accounts. Everything we had, I had built on my own. The house, the car, my savings, it was all mine. Jennifer hadn't invested anything in our life together. She was always more interested in partying, dressing up, and eating out at expensive restaurants. She lived in the moment, and I guess I had been blind enough to think that was just part of her charm. But now, that charm had cost her everything. She didn't contest the divorce. I'm not even sure if she could have. We both knew she had no legal claim to anything I owned. The lawyers handled everything quickly, efficiently, and before I knew it, it was over. Just a few signatures, a few meetings, and she was out of my life for good. I tried not to think about where she was or what she was doing. I'd done everything I could to cut her out completely. But sometimes, late at night, I couldn't help but picture her at that farm, alone and pregnant, trying to figure out what to do next. She had always been the kind of person who floated through life without a care, but now, everything had changed. She'd have to work, really work, for the first time in her life. Those 2 unborn kids weren't going to take care of themselves. Gone were the days of brunches, fancy dinners, and shopping sprees. She had traded in her dresses and high heels for mud, sweat, and the reality of single motherhood. I knew the farm wouldn't be anything like the life she'd loved so much. It wasn't clean or easy or glamorous. It was hard, dirty work, and it demanded everything from you. I couldn't imagine her, out there in the fields, trying to pick berries or haul crates around, struggling to keep up, but that was her reality now. She had no more safety net, no more free ride. And the thought of her finally facing consequences, of having to live a life she never expected, never prepared for, gave me a strange sense of closure. For so long, she'd been living in this bubble of comfort, moving from party to party, from one pleasure to the next, never stopping to think about the future. But now, she was stuck in it, and there was no escape. She had burned all her bridges, including the one that led back to me. I wasn't happy about it, not exactly. I didn't find joy in seeing someone else suffer, but I couldn't deny that there was a sense of justice in it. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. I thought about those kids sometimes, those twins who weren't mine but were still innocent in all of this. They didn't ask to be born into such a mess. I wondered how she'd handle it, raising them on her own, trying to make ends meet without the cushion of my income, without the comfortable lifestyle she'd grown used to. It was hard to picture her managing, but I guessed she'd have to learn, one way or another. As for me, I could finally breathe again. The house was mine, the life I had built was still intact, and I was free. Free from the lies, the betrayal, and the constant doubt that had been eating away at me for months. I was alone, but I was okay with that. At least now, I could start over, and this time, I would build a future on something real, something honest. I moved forward, slowly but surely, taking each day as it came. I wasn't sure what the future would hold, but at least I knew it wouldn't be built on lies. Jennifer was out of my life, and whatever she was doing at that farm was no longer my concern. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could see clearly. The path ahead was open, and I was ready to walk it, even if it meant doing it alone. Bye-bye.